Welcome to Dark Minds, Shattered Lives, where we expose predators, dive into the minds of evildoers, and help you and your loved ones avoid them. I'm your host, Deborah Dobbs. I'm an author and victim advocate with a reputation for rattling cages. Over the last few weeks, there have been kind of a barrage of stories about CEOs behaving badly. It's nothing new to see CEOs behaving badly. Like, they just don't care about people. They don't care about, the minions, the peasants. They just want to make a buck. Like the CEO who is insisting that the products don't actually go off. They don't go off. And in spite of all the facts showing that, yes, these weapons do go off and they've hurt people and they've killed people, the CEO is doubling down. He's got a team, and the board isn't seeming to do anything. Now, as of today, that's what I know of. There may have been developments since this recording that have shown improvement or a recall. But I've also seen it where it's transferring into the nonprofit world, locally, close to home for me. I was actually hesitant to even talk about this because these CEOs, these people in power, they like to sue people. They just want to, impoverish you. They may not win the lawsuit, but they can outspend you. And so they make you miserable, and they punish you. Just in the process, they're punishing you. There's a book called Snakes in Suits, and it's written by Paul Babiak. I'm pronouncing that wrong. But also Dr. Robert Hare. They both wrote this book. And it's very similar to Robert Hare's Without Conscience, except this focuses on corporate America, on the corporate world. So CEOs who are psychopaths or display enough of those psychopathic traits that they're just really unpleasant. It's people who are, the corporate climbers who lie, manipulate, they charm people into thinking they're likable and competent, and they're actually psychopaths. I really like the book Dangerous Personalities, and I prefer to use that term because I'm not equipped to diagnose anybody, but I like to help people understand the traits and try to spot them. Years ago, when I'm still with a nonprofit that I've been with this nonprofit for 30 years, and I keep it separate from the podcast, so that's why I'm not naming it. The agency I run had been involved providing services to another agency. It was another nonprofit that served domestic violence victims, women and children that were fleeing abusive situations, and it was is a transitional living facility. It was a great concept because residents could stay there for 18 months and get counseling and job training and, all kinds of help and live somewhat independently in theory. And the component that was missing was the professional therapy services. So we entered into an agreement, and the founder was also the board chair and had been since its inception and still is today, which is, with some nonprofits, that's just a red flag. It's not just a matter of founder syndrome, where founders, the agency grows and evolves and raises its standards, and the founders are just kind of holding it back. That's not what this is. This is just someone staying in a position of control and power a little bit too long, and having no background in the industry, knowing nothing about domestic violence, and kind of just questionable the whole deal, as you will see as we go on. But anyway, I had a professional relationship with this person, the founder, who knew I was honest, knew I had high standards, and because some of the requirements on our end to provide services were very inconvenient for this person. And we had a service agreement with them for years. And then this new executive director came in. And she was vastly different from her predecessor. And it took some adjusting, but she seemed very book smart, had the educational pedigree was impressive. She was apparently a lawyer or had a law degree. And she was a fundraising, just magic with fundraising. And I witnessed that. I saw the people making their donations live. And I mean, it was over the top for me. Fundraising is not my forte. That was her happy place. Fundraising, according to her, was her happy place. And it didn't take long at all before she was expressing some concerns about the founder, making some allegations about his ethics, questionable ethics, and some erratic behavior, some pretty outrageous things. But she also said that he was under federal investigation and that he was kind of doing some wonky stuff with the finances and that the SEC was investigating him. My understanding, clear understanding, was that she wanted to leave, but that she was stuck because she was a witness and she had to cooperate with the SEC. And so she was having to download records and get things in order, and that then she would make her exit. And she was actually going to come and work with us and do fundraising for us. I didn't want to do anything sneaky. I wanted the founder to know because we had this long-lasting, long-term relationship, professional relationship. And so I didn't want to look like I was poaching. And she had assured me she would talk to him and that the position she was in was not what she thought it was going to be and that she just wanted to focus on fundraising. No hard feelings, that sort of thing. Well, I started noticing that some of the tales she was telling were just, they were just unbelievable. She started weaving some details into things and, it was about this investigation and waiting. And so I actually wrote to the SEC, sent an email to them, called, sent an email saying, hey, is this really going on? Because I just have some questions. They responded with the usual, we can't confirm or deny that there's an investigation. So I have a good bullshit detector, generally. But with this woman, I think it needed an upgrade or the batteries were wearing out. I don't know. My bullshit detector did not go off for months. But then it went off and I started backing off from the person. And I think she detected it because she started interrupting the flow of services between our agencies. And notably, it was noticeable that we were supposed to be providing services to their residents. And we knew residents were moving in, but we were not providing the services to them because they weren't getting referred. It was just kind of under the radar because I think she knew that I was skeptical. About almost a year goes by. And I'm waiting for this investigation to blow up. And so on June 23rd, 2020, I wrote to an investigator. His last name's Parco. And I said, I'm following up one more time before I request a meeting with the founder. Because I decided I'm going to tell the founder. I'm just going to tell him all the stuff that she's been saying about him, all these accusations. And I wrote, because the place has been assisting this agency roughly 10 years ago, I believe I owe it to the founder to sit down and discuss our decision to terminate the service agreement we've maintained for many of those years. Furthermore, I feel compelled to advise him of my interactions with the executive director, including her allegations of his illicit behavior and supposed investigation by the SEC. Because I have not heard back from you, and more than a year has passed since the executive director provided this information, I'm assuming that my conversation with the founder will not jeopardize any SEC investigation because no investigation ever existed. I got an email back, the usual, can't confirm or deny, with a phone number to call if I had any questions. So I called the phone number and I said, okay, now's the time to tell me, because I know if you have an investigation on someone, you don't want somebody else calling the suspect to give them a heads up. And so they admitted that there wasn't an investigation of the person, of the founder, who was a financial like wealth management, nor was the executive director a witness. You couldn't find any case where she had been the witness. So I decided immediately that same day, I notified the founder, and I told him everything. I told him about the lies. I told him about the accusations that he had severe addiction problems and that he was known to have a gun, and that the director was scared of him, and that I had been planning on hiring her. Didn't know if she had bothered to tell him that. Told him why, and here's the kicker. What she said was that there were donation receipts, confirmations of big donations, but there were never any deposits corresponding with those donations. But the people who supposedly made them got their tax receipt, so I guess they could write them off their taxes. Or they did make the donation and somebody was keeping the money, pocketing it. And the implication, I believe, was what she was trying to insinuate was that founder was pocketing the donations himself, or he was colluding and trying to help his friends or his clients have more write-offs or whatever, deductions. He was upset that I hadn't told him sooner, and that was about all he had to say. And so I thought, okay, well, she's going to get fired. And surely you wouldn't keep someone on staff who's telling lies like that and making these accusations. You've got to have somebody trustworthy working on your team, especially someone trustworthy when they're having access to bank accounts and they can spend money and they have to manage grants, grant money, donor money. You can't have a liar in that position. So I would check the website frequently. I never talked to him again, never talked to the founder again. And her name was always appearing as executive director. There wasn't any change. And for months and months, there was no change. They continued with this gala, and it just got bigger. I believe Kevin Costner's band played. I know her title changed, and things other than that, they just seemed to be going on as if nothing ever happened. So I was really suspicious. I kept waiting for her to get arrested, and or him to get arrested, because at some point, like, well, maybe they're doing something together. Maybe she wasn't lying about what he did or what he was doing as far as the donations go. Maybe that was true. And maybe it kind of gave her a pass. Again, this is me guessing back then, just trying to figure out why on earth this person would still be employed at this agency. You just kind of fill in the blanks. And one of the possibilities was that, well, maybe they're both doing bad things. And she had him over a barrel. I don't know. So my husband would check online too, and looking for, arrests, court cases, and then one popped up. And it was a bankruptcy filed by the executive director, CEO. And then I went to the website, noticed her name wasn't on the website anymore. And there was also a court filing against her by the nonprofit. So Wayne and I drove up to the courthouse and got the records. And I haven't been saying names because lawsuits, right? But I'm going to read from a court document. I'm not speculating. I'm not alleging even. This isn't my opinion. So you're gonna hear the names. So this was filed July 2023. The plaintiff is Emily's Place. And that is in Plano, Texas. The defendant is Brandy Bruno, a.k.a. Bryn Bruno. That's how I knew her, was Bryn Bruno. And if you're watching, you can see this. If you're listening only, what I have is a copy, official copy of the record, and I'll read it to you. It's cause number 4710397 2023. Emily's Place, plaintiff, files its original petition and application for temporary restraining order, temporary and permanent injunctive relief, complaining of Brandy Bruno, a.k.a. Bryn Bruno, and respectfully shows the court the following. There's going to be, I think, over 24 points here, statements of the case. Emily's Place is a nonprofit organization that provides care for women and their children fleeing domestic violence. In late 2018, Bryn Bruno was hired as its executive director. Point 2, I'm going to jump down, Bryn Bruno engaged in a recently discovered pattern of theft, embezzlement, deception, and fraud in an effort to take funds and other property belonging to Emily's Place to use for her own personal benefit. And then Miss Bruno sought to cover up her unlawful acts by ensuring she was the only one with access to the company's records and publishing a number of defamatory and false statements about Emily's Place founder and longtime president in an effort to shift the blame for her actions. So remember the dangerous personality, the traits, the lying, manipulating, no accountability. And then we're going to continue down. There's all this discovery. Here's some more statement of facts. 14. Emily's Place hired Bruno in or around December 2018 as its executive director, and Bruno quickly became a trusted member of the team and became CEO in mid to late 2022. 2 years after I warned this guy. Bruno served as the CEO of Emily's Place until she was suspended without pay on or about July 12, 2023, due to a pending federal investigation surrounding her actions. Apparently, she was under federal investigation. And then it just goes on to list the following actions that she engaged in, such as charging personal items and gift cards on the Emily's Place credit card, setting up unauthorized bank accounts in her name, and transferring money, company funds, to her personal accounts. She disabled all other parties but her own access to Emily's Place's QuickBooks account, unauthorized opening of accounts and credit cards, at least one of which was then used for personal expenses and paid by Emily's Place, attempting to hide the fraud and theft by eliminating outside professionals' access to financial documents and software, including QuickBooks. In the process, this is 17. In the process, Bruno transferred millions of dollars of plaintiff's funds to her personal accounts. Bruno accomplished this theft by taking advantage of her position at Emily's Place. Her position gave her access to Emily's Place's company credit card, debit card, as well as access to the company's bank accounts at Regions Bank. It was mid-April 2023 that Emily's Place was contacted by Regions Bank. They were inquiring about the organization's financial condition. Mark Hagan, as Emily's Place founder and president, started investigating Bruno's actions, given the troubling inquiry from Regions Bank. Not in June 2020, having known me for years and knowing me as an honest person, didn't start investigating then? No, July 7th, 2023, Hagan met with a rep at Regions Bank in Plano, Texas. He had discovered that his access to the operating account had been denied because Bruno had deliberately caused the account to only have her as a single named signer for the account. It goes on all this nefarious stuff she did, and he's surprised because he had no idea. I had no idea. Yeah, he had no idea. Here's another one, 25. As Emily's Place investigated Bruno's actions, it has become clear that Bruno has set up a number of personal accounts in her name and was diverting large sums of Emily's Place funds and other donations meant for Emily's Place to her personal accounts. She even withheld over $4 million of undeposited checks from donors, some checks being held since April or May of 2023. Why? I can't even imagine having $4 million worth in donations. I run an agency that does very similar work. We help all kinds of crime victims, and I am accountable for every penny that is spent. Never in the history of the agency have we had even $1 million provided to us by a donor. This is $4 million, just checks sitting there. So there you have it. That's like part of all of these statements. Those are just a piece of it. So we go get the records. I text Mark Hagan. Like, I don't remember exactly what I texted, but like, hey, heard what happened. Figured she was going to blame stuff on you. And, and I'm kind of acting nice, figuring, maybe he'll call because I want the name of the investigator. And he didn't give it to me, but he did call. And I had my I told you so moment. I warned you. And you didn't listen. And look what's happened now. Again, I keep thinking she's going to get arrested. And to my knowledge, she was never arrested. We keep looking, keep checking county sites, maybe the news would. I mean, you have somebody arrested for this type of theft, embezzlement at this nonprofit that was pretty well known, big bashes and tennis tournaments and people throwing money at them. That's probably newsworthy, and nothing would ever come up. So I don't know why Mark Hagan hasn't pursued criminal charges against Bruno. For as far as I know, that has not happened. There's no evidence of that. In fact, I'll tell you, I went to the FBI myself with a folder of emails and some of it, yes, just my experience, not hard evidence, but it also included that lawsuit and the statements made in that lawsuit. And the question asked of me was, well, who's the victim? Who's the victim here? I'm like, well, do I really need to put it out there, like present the idea of who the victim is? What about the donors who donated significant amounts of money in good faith? And it wasn't to buy houses or cars or whatever Bruno bought with their donations. And how about the residents there that go in good faith expecting to get services? How are services affected, in what way, by this theft? And then what about federal funds? Because I believe Emily's Place was awarded federal funds. And I don't know about state funds, but I do believe they received federal funds under the Victims of Crime Act funding, VOCA grants. And we have that grant. I'm like, audits are terrible. I don't want to get audited. I am so careful. I also have someone overseeing our accounting system who is had a career as a forensic accountant and a certified fraud examiner who has put internal controls in place. I mean, you just don't have one person just unfettered, just reign over the financials. That's absurd. I don't know how they had an annual audit of their financial statements. It was actually legit. That would not point that out. Hey, this is a problem, guys. I don't get it. So anyway, yeah, I think you have victims. But the FBI said, well, the Secret Service looks like they're well into their investigation, so we're not going to do anything. I emailed the Secret Service, never heard back. And I'm checking. To my knowledge, I mean, this has been years. Nothing has happened. No one's been arrested. So then this lawsuit pops up. So you Fast forward 2023, bankruptcy, civil suits. I haven't pulled up all the court documents. All right. What I'm going to pull up for you now is about this stupid lawsuit. It's stupid. Okay. Plaintiff Emily's Place versus Social Llama LLC. Defendant Social Llama Events LLC's motion to overrule discovery objections and to compel responsive documents and brief in support. Again, if you're listening, I'm going to read some of this to you. It's cause number DC-24-12836. And this is in the District Court of Dallas County, 134th Judicial District, Dallas County, Texas. The other is Collin County. So Emily's Place is suing Social Llama because Emily's Place had a thief as a CEO who took money that was supposed to be, that belonged to Emily's Place, and she took it. She stole it. And so it's somehow Social Llama's fault. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. It's not funny because this company, I don't know, if you need an event in the Dallas area, please call Social Llama because this is bullshit, what they're going through. So here's a summary of an argument, and I love this. I love where this attorney representing Social Llama, he's going in the right direction, and I hope he keeps going. Here's the summary of argument. This is a bizarre fact pattern where a plaintiff wrongfully seeks to shift the blame for the criminal misconduct of its own CEO to a defendant, who is nothing more than an outside vendor who throws galas, weddings, and large parties for high net worth individuals and companies, having absolutely no obligation to police the executives of its own customers. Indeed, defendant, Social Llama Events, LLC, defendant, has been unfairly sued for being paid for work it undoubtedly performed pursuant to an agreement that was authorized and approved by plaintiff's former CEO, Bryn Bruno. Defendant has no legal duty to monitor the employment of plaintiff's CEO, nor is it responsible for the criminal acts of a third party who plaintiff and plaintiff alone chose to promote to CEO. It has become clear that the proximate cause of any alleged damage to plaintiff is its own negligence and willful blindness in how it runs its organization. I told you so. I told you back in 2020. To this end, that wasn't in the court document, that was my commentary. Back to the document. To this end, when defendant reached out to plaintiff about obtaining wiring instructions to return an overpayment, defendant ignored 2 emails on this very issue because it has no one to answer them, refused to return multiple calls because it has no one to answer the phone, and seeks now to complain, ex post, even though it was plaintiff's former CEO who demanded the refund on plaintiff's own letterhead. And notwithstanding the fact that its then CEO also forged the endorsement of the refund check that had been made payable to plaintiff. In fact, the true innocent victim of a fraud is defendant, who had its bank accounts shut down without warning, but for the criminal misconduct of plaintiff's former CEO, resulting in its owner having to temporarily fund its payroll out of pocket while plaintiff tried to clean up its own mess. Now it appears the plaintiff is wrongfully withholding documents about what the board of directors knew, what plaintiff, insofar as due diligence, should have been doing, information germane to defendant's settlement credit, and emails and text messages by and between its board chairman, Mark Hagan, and plaintiff's former CEO, Bryn Bruno. 3, Roman numeral 3. Here's a brief factual predicate. Now, first, remember when I told you, I don't know if I told you this. I didn't tell you this yet. So going back years, so this is obviously 2025, this case. And then you go back a few years, several years. Even before Bruno, I think, was CEO. I don't know. There'd be tours of Emily's Place. And it was impressive. There was a historical home, or is, where admin offices were. There's a big house with multiple rooms, big kitchen and sitting area. They have a playground, and then they launched this other house on the property, and they were doing a tour or like a ribbon cutting, things like that, whatever. And inevitably someone would whisper, is this a money laundering organization? Because it was just bizarre. So the founder is Mark Hagan, and he would pull up in his, Porsche or whatever, something equivalent to that. And he always wears these custom made suits where, you can see the stitching and like you can tell this is very expensive stuff. And he's got his Prada this and his Hugo Boss that, if that's still a thing. From his eyeglasses to his shoes, everything was designer and top end. And he's a wealth management guy, so okay, yeah, it makes sense. But when you stroll in to a domestic violence shelter, a transitional living facility, and the residents there they're going through probably the worst times of their lives, and they're broke, and they're scared. It's just like not reading the room very well. And it was a little like, why is he even doing this? Because it always just seemed kind of like a show. And that's my opinion. That's a lot of people's opinions. I do know one of his clients, he was impressed by this effort. That client was actually a volunteer at our organization, and he was impressed. But I always thought it was a little weird that why is one of your clients whose money you manage kind of tied in to your organization and also making donations? It just seemed like a conflict of interest. It just didn't seem above board. I don't know if it was unethical or illegal, but it just didn't smell right. But the man himself was a wonderful man. Our volunteer, who also was a client of Mark Hagan, he was a wonderful man. And so I trusted his opinion. It was a good concept. In theory, Emily's Place is a great idea. So anyway, it leads to this part in this court document that's relevant. So, Roman numeral 3, brief factual predicate. Plaintiff, Emily's Place, is believed to be at least in part, a sham charity, where the impression it seeks to leave with the public in its marketing campaign about the laudable goal of providing shelter to victims of domestic violence, designed, at least in part, to lure new donations and to pacify existing donors who continue to donate, stands in stark contrast to the reality of what actually happens, both internally and in messaging between its board chairman, Mark Hagan, and one or more of its past or present executives. I'd love to see those text messages. Behind the curtain is what appears to be, at least in part, an abusive tax shelter, so that its founder and board chairman, Mark Hagan, a financial planner and investment manager at UBS, can create excessive tax write-offs for himself and as a reward to some of his bigger clients. In fact, over a 4-month period in 2023, over $15 million appears to have either been laundered through plaintiff's bank account, or those dollar amounts were inflated when plaintiff made a claim against its insurance policy. I don't know what that's about. Regardless, when deposed, plaintiff's current CEO, not Bruno, but the current CEO, could not explain how such an enormous sum of money came through plaintiff's bank account in such a short period of time, especially given that its annual revenues are approximately $1.7 million. Be that as it may, on an annual basis, Hagan would at times have Bruno create tax receipts issued by plaintiff that he would give to his bigger investment clients for unearned tax deductions. I believe that's an IRS issue. I wonder if the IRS would be willing or interested in this. I wonder how many donors are feeling that clinch. Not that they're listening to this. This is the thing. I have multiple times warned people about other people or businesses. Hey, man, that person's a crook. Don't believe it's a totally other agency than this one. From this one, it's, you know, the person's a crook. If they pledge to give you 150 grand or whatever, don't count on it. They're doing bad business. They're misappropriating funds. I have evidence of this. They don't listen. Hey, here's a corrupt developer. City of not going to say. You might want to avoid this person. They don't listen. I mean, I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. And so it's so frustrating. But in this case, I guess Hagen, you could warn him, he didn't care because he had his other thing going. So it was basically just tipping off one crook to the other. That's how it seems. So let's keep going. This document is great. It's tragic. On one occasion, a donor donated a $60,000 auction item, which comprised of a lavish golf trip to Scotland. On information and belief, Hagen removed this luxury golf vacation as an auction item, went to Scotland with his friends, played golf, and then he wrote a check to plaintiff for $5,000, resulting in both a free vacation and the parallel benefit of a tax deduction without maximizing that value and corresponding revenue through an open bid process among potential donors. While it claims to be a domestic violence shelter, plaintiff has no person to either respond to emails or even answer the phone, which is the very reason it apparently failed to obtain the refund issued by defendant, upon which it now sues. Defendant has reason to believe and doesn't believe the donors who did not earmark their donation for a special purpose do not know that their donations are going to fund this lawsuit rather than to help women who are the victims of domestic violence. Again, FBI, there are victims here. This was filed in July 2025, so I don't know what's happened since then. It's a true crime podcast, and so, yes, it makes sense that I would cover this, but why would I pick this one? And I think it's because this really bothers me because, as I said, I'm tired. I get tired of warning people, and I guess it's cognitive dissonance. No, people don't want to believe that they're wrong. I mean, I suspected something was off, but I didn't know it was like this. And so to know that I got sucked in and charmed, that's not pleasant to admit. And here's also the other thing. There are a lot of nonprofits, like the one I'm at, that we are working our tails off. And we don't have sexy causes. And we don't have some wealth management guy, you know, and all his wealthy friends being recruited to donate. We don't have huge galas and spending gobs of money on these events. We're just doing the work, you know, and we're working hard and we're working with very little. And so if you want to donate to a nonprofit, just do some research and maybe don't be lured in and enticed by shiny things. Just be wary. So there's a lot of people that should be in trouble here, and I don't know if anything's going to happen. If I were some big shot, then maybe there'd be influence, and somebody would actually investigate this criminally. I hope this attorney keeps digging, because I'm fed up. I think, like a lot of people, I'm just fed up with people getting away with stuff, and especially people who are wealthy. And they just are entitled, this entitlement. But there's a tendency where you're just looking the other way, and the people that, you know, may hold them accountable are equally guilty. I mean, these board members, what the heck? What is going on? We have things set in place, and I hope other agencies do this too, where my staff has meetings and I'm not there. I'm not a part of those meetings, so that if I start acting weird or slacking or doing questionable things, they will discuss it, and they have a direct line to the board. And that's on purpose. I set that up. I know of a local nonprofit director who's firing people if they talk about her, if she's listening in. And if she can't hear everything they're saying, she gets pretty pissed off and comes back and yells at them and stuff. I mean, it's insanity. No one should be left in a position of power like that. No one. Anyway, I just scratched the surface of this. And I do want to dig in. I want to see how this develops. And if I get any more, if I find out there's something that's changed, then I'll share it with you. But getting back to, this book on the snakes in suits, it is really hard when you have a vacant spot, especially a leadership role. Like board members, they're not on the payroll. Board members are just volunteering their time, and they're getting in there to help the mission and support the agency. They're not there for drama. They're not there to deal with an executive director who's embezzling money or acting like a tyrant. But unfortunately, it's their responsibility to step up when that happens. And then when it's time to hire someone, if let's say you have someone retiring and you want them to help you in the hiring process, listen to them. This is someone who's been with the agency for years, and they know their employees. They know how the place runs, and hopefully they also know where it can, what can be done better. Whatever it is, if you enlist that person to help you, then listen to what they have to say. And that's one of the things that I think in this book, Snakes in Suits, he warns against people violating their current policies about hiring and not listening to human resources. If you're in a corporation or a bigger organization and you have a human resources department and you have policies and procedures in place, honor them. And if this person you really like and you're just tempted to bypass all that and say, this guy's great, I'm hiring this person because he's just wowed me or whatever, don't do that. Go through the process. But that was one thing that came up in the book that I've noticed is that kind of a rush to fill the position. And it can be devastating. It can just bring an organization down or run off really good people. One more thing I'll mention with this book. At first I thought it was just, it's just kind of like Without Conscience, just repackaged for corporate America. But they go into a lot of these kind of themes among psychopaths in corporations, subtypes. They say forensic research on psychopaths has recently revealed that there are, in fact, several psychopathic subtypes within the global syndrome of psychopathy. These subtypes, the classic, the macho, and the manipulative, are described in a sidebar in the book. I mean, it's very interesting. It gets very detailed. They kind of weave this story, kind of make this fictional story to illustrate their points that I'm not crazy about. But I'm also not in corporate America, so maybe if you are, you'll relate to that more. I'll probably talk more about this book in another episode, but I want to keep them relatively short. So thanks for tuning in. And until next time, trust your gut and know your exits.